Welcome back to Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue. Thanks for joining us today. We are here to talk about something I think we are all seeing a lot of, which is the collapse of civility around us.
Yeah, I read about stuff like this in the paper every day, so we're definitely in situations now where people are just about hair triggered to throw a fit, challenge you, argue with you. And we talked about conflict resolution last time, but that's sort of more intimate. We're talking about individuals that we're having a conflict with. We talked about in that one how we wanted to maintain that communication and maintain that relationship. This one, we're going to be talking about maintaining dignity within a conversation. So when you get into a conflict with somebody and say it's, external, they're not an intimate partner or a friend or a close relationship of some sort. This is just about social interaction with strangers out in public, acquaintances, going to meetings, things like that, and how you interact with people that may or may not have the same kind of opinion or perspective that you do.
Yeah, absolutely right. So let's talk a little bit about what civility means to us. When we reference civility, we're not talking about necessarily politeness. And civility also doesn't mean just staying silent instead of being able to express your opinion, even in a disagreement. There is a way to be civil. So what civility means to us is protecting your dignity even during disagreements. And what we've noticed is that by and large, that goes out the window really quickly in a lot of places. And it's become so commonplace that we've forgotten that there's a better way to communicate and still be respectful and still get your opinion out there.
Yeah, even when we met, I'm going to share this cute little personal story
Love
here.
this story.
But even when we first met, one of the things that attracted me most to Carolsue is that we were having a conversation and I was in my infancy stages of saying that anger is not necessary. Like there's no reason for people to get angry at each other. And we're still proving that. So I know you want to argue that, but at least do it civilly.
That's right.
Yeah. But at the end of that whole conversation, I was so used to just people telling me how stupid I was or how that's a dumb idea and not understanding that it's not about suppression. It's about reframing it so you don't get angry. She said, well, I don't agree, because at the time she had some situations that were making her quite angry. But, yeah. And she very simply said, I don't agree with that, but I find your opinion very interesting. And that was a completely different feeling to me, because that in that moment she completely preserved the dignity of it. Didn't try to tell me I was stupid because of, and usually it comes from the person that I'm talking with is very insecure about handling their anger. Like rather than saying, yeah, maybe anger shouldn't be part of my repertoire when I'm interacting, they're like, well, that makes me a bad person. Well, that, if I'm angry and he's trying to say that it's not necessary, then, and it's not a normal part of communication, then that must mean I'm wrong or I'm bad or something. And that's not what it is. It's just, as we've spoken about anger quite a bit in our previous shows, is that, that's just what's been put on us. We've been made that way. We've been taught that those are our reactions to conflict. When we get that little bit of discomfort in ourselves, which has been created by society putting this on us, it immediately triggers that idea that we should lash out, that we should shut it down, that we should dominate, and we should not allow the person to have their alternative opinion.
Yeah.
So saying things like, I disagree with you, but I respect you, which is exactly what I'm talking about. What Carolsue said to me, or, we don't see it the same way, but that's okay. We've been preaching curiosity quite a bit.
So glad you said that. Yes.
Yeah. So one of those things, with this is saying, I don't really understand, but I want to. So explain it more. And then at the end, even, laughing together and going, yeah, I don't agree with you, but I really respect that. That's your focus on this particular situation, which is really cool. And it really is sort of mind blowing when you can leave a conversation, maintain that friendship, especially now with the climate. I mean, there are families that are torn apart because of differences of opinion. And that's what we're talking about, is that it doesn't really need to come to that. There's still a way that people can be individual, completely 180 degrees different from each other when it comes to a particular topic, and still be close, intimate, or friends. And at a minimum, at least still be polite to each other.
Yes.
And that's the one thing we're saying here.
That's right. We're all about maintaining and caring for important relationships, and civility goes a long way with that. And I'm glad that you brought up curiosity, because sometimes when someone shares an opinion with me that sparks something that makes me feel like, oh my gosh, that's a really strong opinion, I don't think I agree with that, I'll usually lead by saying, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Instead of immediately coming back with why I think that's incorrect, I'll keep the connection by saying, I respect you, so I want to know more about why you feel that way.
Right.
And that in itself is not only civil, but it's a gesture to the other person I'm talking with that the relationship matters more to me than this potential difference of opinion.
Yeah, that's perfect. So like we said earlier, our previous shows have been about what we would say like micro interactions, you know, the zoom in kind of close interactions, the intimate interactions, the known interactions. But what we're talking about is we're talking about the macro, the zoom out, you know, how we interact in society. And this is a really great episode to hone in on, because this episode sort of sets the baseline for focused behavior when it comes to interacting with individuals from our previous show. So when it comes to like dealing with conflict or dealing with anger or dealing with people that have that superiority complex, when you start practicing this socially, that becomes your normal makeup, and it makes those other things easier to handle. So the best people to practice with are strangers. You know what I mean? You don't have anything to lose, you know, when you just start being kind to an individual. So what we want to do is we want to backtrack a little bit. You know, why are we here? Why are we in this place where we think that being uncivilized with each other or being condescending or being mean is the default to disagreement? And I think a lot of it comes from punishment. You know, the fact that we've worked with shame and punishment so much that we have this mentality of, you know, I'm going to punish you for what you did to me, that now we have this mindset that we have to get back at others. If someone wrongs us, then we have to wrong them back. If someone says something we don't like, we not only have to tell them we don't like it, but we have to make them feel stupid or bad about saying something that we didn't like. And this is where we've gotten off track. I mean, this is where we're attacking people basically that don't have anything to do with the problem in the moment. It's our own insecurity. It's just perpetuating that anger. It's perpetuating that negativity. It's perpetuating that fear that drives that negativity. You know, going back to what we've said over and over again in every other show, the fact that you're acting on that is fear-based. The fact that you feel like this particular group could eventually hurt somebody or yourself some way, and you attack it with aggression. And those kind of things just keep perpetuating themselves, and they keep normalizing themselves, where we think that now whenever anybody says anything we don't like, we have to be mean about it. We talked about in an earlier show how, like, if you saw a bumper sticker that was different from your idea, you know, you just sort of look at it and go, what an idiot, and walk on. And now, you know, I mean, that was 20 years ago that I'm talking about. I don't even see that many bumper stickers anymore. So
good point.
But now, I mean, there have been people that have vandalized a vehicle because of a bumper sticker that was a difference of opinion than theirs. So what's the motivation here? I mean, and I think you told me one story, like that person who vandalized that vehicle was like fined $6,000.
There was a $6,000 damages they had to pay, and they got a criminal charge.
It's a felony
for destruction of property. You can't do that.
So what is the outcome? Like, what is the need? Like, even in those moments, like I always think back in the day, you know, when guys being guys, and that's not being accepting of it, that's not the boys will be boys thing. I don't do that at all. But like guys would be like, you know, why are you looking at my girlfriend? And then they think that the answer to that is to kick your butt. So I'm not sure where those relate. Like, if you kick my butt, I'm not sure how that's going to like fix the problem that I have with looking at your girlfriend. So all those things that we infuse aggression in these situations to handle things that are just very simple, but the aggressors are always acting from a place of fear. Like in that case, you know, that person is afraid that my attention given to his girlfriend will be reciprocated now, and he'll lose his girlfriend. So he's starting from a very insecure standpoint, but he thinks that aggression is going to fix that, and it never does. It just creates more aggression and creates more normalization of the behavior in yourself. So back to my original point, full circle once again, is that, you know, if we practice this in society, there's no loss. And you know, because a lot of times also people will act that certain way because they're afraid of getting taken advantage of. So they put on that front. So rather than be somebody that can cope with being taken advantage of and know how to set boundaries when they see it, they put up this front of sort of anger. It's like those people who say, I didn't come here to make friends. It's like, well, you know, you're doing that because you're insecure about somebody eventually taking advantage of you, and you're not living your life anymore. So now you put all of your relationships at arm's distance.
Put up this wall.
Put up this wall just to keep from being taken advantage of, when really your coping skills should go on the back end and say, I'm going to be as friendly as I can possibly be to people and set that model. But if they try to take advantage of me, I'm going to set a boundary. And I'm going to set it with firmness, not aggression. Like you can say, that's one of the things that we've talked about in other videos, is that you can be assertive without being aggressive.
So true.
I mean, I do it all the time, and you can see that people are so used to assertiveness with aggression that they're baffled by it.
Yeah, it does stop them in their tracks.
Yeah, you know, and I think I brought up the example of the coffee cup. It's like, hey, can I use your coffee cup? I'm like, no, I don't let other people use my coffee cup. And they're like, come on, man, I'll wash it afterwards. I'm like, no, I don't want you to use it. I'm not going to explain why, but go find another coffee cup. And see, there was no anger there, just cutting it off. And if I have to, I'll take it and lock it up if you really can't understand what I'm saying right now. But getting aggressive doesn't serve anything.
Mm-mm. So a lack of civility has become so commonplace that we just want to talk real quick about how you can recognize it, whether it's at home, in your workplace, in your friend group. So what you'll see is people interrupting each other instead of listening to someone's full idea. So in some cases, people get so uncomfortable with a challenge to their opinion or with a statement that challenges something they feel, that they'll have to cut that person off before they finish the thought. That can be a sign of incivility. Just not letting somebody complete their sentence is rude. It's uncivil by definition, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, and that's one of the things that I think that we've lost. You know, like you and I were talking about how when we were young kids, you know, we walk into a store with our parents or our mom and dad, and they're like, now you behave while we're in here. You know, we get that preface, almost like a pre-designed threat on your behavior, that if you act in a certain way, embarrass us or whatever, you're going to get punished.
Yes.
You know, and that was just something that was put in our head, but it doesn't mean it got acted on in the moment.
Right.
But it was something that we got primed for, we got trained for, we got programmed to, in public settings.
That's right.
Be considerate of others, which, you know, I'm going to say being considerate of others, which means actually considering whatever you're doing and its impact on the people around you. For those of you who like to have speaker phone calls on the train again, or or in a restaurant or something like that, or you let your kids run wild and disturb other people. Those are the kind of things that we think society is sort of lost and trying to keep those things from happening. So that interrupting thing, you know, that was like one of the things, like, you know, a kid speaks up back in the day. It's like, don't you interrupt. You know what I mean? Like, you get snapped at, and we were primed not to, you know, and as a kid, you're like, you know, looking for your way to, you know, because kids don't have that, they don't have that restraint that adults should be developing, that is not really happening much in a lot of cases right now also. But, you know, kids don't have that restraint. So it's like, can I say something, you know? And we were taught that almost to a level of paranoia, not to interrupt. So.
Oh yes. If in my case, my mom still had hold of my hand and I started to interrupt, I would get that
a little bit of
squeeze.
Yeah, a little pressure.
and you know exactly what that meant. It meant it's not your turn to talk.
It was a great communication tactic too. Yeah, I mean, and it's not a painful thing. It's just like, I'm listening to you, and this is your little tap for what you're doing right now I don't approve of, so stop it.
Exactly right.
I mean, you could be in mid-sentence and you get that squeeze, and it's like, yeah, and another thing isn't, okay.
It's like a power off.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So if you're in a place where civility has been lost, you also might experience a situation where you share your opinion and someone actually makes fun of you.
Yeah. I've told you this before. I grew up in a household that everything was criticized.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just, you know, what is that? There was no curiosity. It was like, what is that? It was always, it was always that tone about whatever you're doing is stupid. Whatever I'm doing is smart.
Yep.
You know, before you even explain to them what it is. And it was a very odd environment, but we see that a lot in society, you know, back to the incivility aspect. So continue with the interruptions.
That's a very good example. So you might hear people say things like, are you even listening to what I'm saying? Or cutting you off and saying, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, before you even had a chance to get the full thought out there. That's how you know the environment is no longer civil. And we really have to work harder to maintain that civility. But the good news is, like with everything else, the more you practice on strangers, on friends, on family, the easier it becomes. And the more apparent it becomes when you're in a situation that is not civil.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, and a lot of people, even after going through all of these videos or audios, if you're listening to the audio podcast, you're probably still sitting there going, nah, anger is necessary. I need it. Because that is, you have been conditioned so deliberately that anger means control.
Exactly.
That it's a very hard thing to release. But think about it, the statements that you just made. Are you even listening? That can be very kindly said, hey, right now I'm really trying to explain something to you that means a lot to me. So I really like your full attention. And I'm not feeling like I have it right now. See, that's a civil way of saying the same thing. And that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's no reason to ever say that.
No, just don't say that.
Or oh, please give me a break. Like all of those kind of things go into the condescending mode. They're not about the information. You're literally trying to make that person feel stupid in the moment. And that's why we say maintaining civility has to do with maintaining dignity for others.
Yeah. And we bring up concepts of power and control because that seems to be what's at the foundation of all of these uncivil behaviors, is the idea that if someone has a different opinion than yours, then there must be one opinion that's better and one opinion that's worse. And what civility teaches us is that there is room at the table for a lot of different ways of thinking. If we stop looking at it from a competitive point of view where someone has to win the conversation, then there is room for civility and acceptance and kinder culture.
So yeah, areas where you can sort of identify that civility has sort of gone off the rails is that, when volume is your primary way of responding back, or any kind of contempt that's actually replacing dialogue, when you're actually putting down the individual or putting down the information, that's sort of an indicator that you're not really desiring a civil conversation. You want to fight now.
And win.
Yeah, and win. Exactly. And not only win, but you also want that other person to feel defeated.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing. It's not just winning, but you also want them to hurt a little bit. And none of that is necessary. There is a kind way of interacting with somebody. Like we brought up the example, a very common example we brought up probably in the first or second video. This is something that I introduce in crisis intervention training all the time, where I talk about how many of you hold the door for people. And then if that person walks through or walks past you without acknowledging you, how many of you go, "You're welcome"? See, that's that issue. That's incivility that you have to enact, instead of just considering the fact that that person might be elsewhere in their thinking. They might be in the middle of literally typing something nowadays, since everybody's always texting. Their mindset might be elsewhere. But what is your purpose in that "you're welcome"? Is that to get them to think in that moment oh my gosh, I was rude to that person. I need to change my life completely now and start paying more attention to people holding the door for me. Those kind of things. It doesn't provoke that person to change their behavior into the behavior that would have been acceptable to you, but it does reinforce them not wanting to develop that behavior, because it doesn't motivate anybody to be talked down to.
Nope.
As much as we do it, think about this, and we are going to have a whole show on shame, but think about what shame does. It does not motivate a person to rise above that moment. It never does. It only solidifies it or makes it worse.
It does. Yeah. The only thing it motivates is that I never want to get into this conversation with this person ever again. So it just changes the connection again, instead of actually motivating people to be better, whatever that looks like.
Exactly. And think about in the case of, holding the door for someone, you can reframe that thinking rather than everything being transactional. Like when you give a gift to somebody, do you get mad at them if they don't like it? When you give advice, do you get mad at them because they don't take it? Because that might not be the advice that they actually need. But that doesn't help that person be more receptive now. That's just identifying your insecurities about how that information is used. So why can't you change that, reframe your thinking into, I did something very kind today. I held the door for somebody. It doesn't matter if they didn't acknowledge me. All that matters is I did a good thing.
Yes.
And then that's it. It doesn't matter, because if you go into that relationship, you go into that moment where you think you're being generous or you're being helpful, and you get angry that it's not received, that's not genuine.
No,
that is transactional. I am doing this to make myself feel better, not to make you feel better. And that's a whole different act when it comes to being generous. And that's why civility doesn't stick in those situations, when you can truly be kind.
Without necessarily noticing it, we have turned into a culture where outrage beats reflection. So being quick seems more valuable than having a thoughtful response. So people value speed over thought. We value reaction over a genuine response. So we want to quickly get that reaction out there, and if we can make it kind of an outrageous reaction, that's so much better. And anger, unfortunately, is rewarded across the board. If you look at the kind of shows that tend to be very popular with us right now, it's things where people are having big angry fights. It's reality shows that pit people against each other. It's these competition shows. So instead of modeling civil behavior, what we find ourselves most attracted to, unfortunately, is this uncivil, borderline aggressive behavior.
Yeah. And, I've told you in previous shows, I was a very angry young man, and it is not necessary. I can look at every one of I can reflect on every situation that I've gotten into, and now all I feel is embarrassment. I feel bad in those moments that I hurt other people's feelings. And that is the way I was programmed. I learned hate and anger and meanness from my parents. They taught me exactly how to retaliate against people because they were always retaliating against me for what they thought I was doing. And I'd say 7 out of 10 times, I didn't even do it. I was just being blamed for it and being punished for it because they'd immediately say, I don't believe you. So, of course, lying takes over because now you're at this moment of 50-50. I'm either going to get punished or not punished. Yep. So lying is the default. So you just end up having those moments where you're proved as a liar and you get punished. And then next time you're not believed as a liar and you get punished anyway. So there's a no-win situation. But in all of those situations, I realized that there was never any reason for me to be mean in retrospect. And I think in my head, just to keep rewiring that brain, I keep thinking, what is the nicest way I could have handled this? Where I'm not being taken advantage of, but I'm also not trying to destroy this person with an insult at the end or getting in the last word or saying, I told you so, or any of those kind of things. What is a better way of doing that? Because none of those things make us closer. None of those things contribute to growth. And of course, all of this goes back to the knowledge and security loop. Where people are so aggressive with each other that some people just shut down completely. I'm not even going to ask because they're just going to make fun of me for not knowing. Yes. So now you don't know anything. They don't know anything because you're not interacting with them. And it just maintains that lack of growth, that lack of knowledge, that lack of education that we get from each other.
I'm very glad you brought that up because I think one of the most powerful ways to combat insecurity is to create these environments that are civil by default, so that there's never any reason to think that if you introduce a new idea, it's going to be laughed at or ridiculed or shamed. Increasing civility overall is really the only way to reduce insecurity, to reduce conflict. So by just doing this one thing with these few simple tools that we're talking about, you can actually solve a lot of other secondary problems.
That's the truth. It's the truth. Like you said, you get that speed replaces thought. The reaction replaces a response. People are like, no, before they even think about it. That pause we talk about every time. And like you said, anger is rewarded, but all of those things just keep perpetuating that anger for both sides.
Yes.
And it inhibits growth. So it's something to think about. So just a simple sentence, like when someone's talking, you're like, basically in your mind, you're like, this is so stupid. And you just blurt out, I don't even need to hear the rest. That just shuts other people down. Everyone knows that already. You don't know if everyone knows that already, first of all. And second of all, there may be something coming out of this that's a correction or that is more extended information. So there's never any reason to cut anybody down. And then, I've talked about that thing that I've been faced with in the past. If you're not with us, you're against us. No. That is not true.
No.
Or if you don't agree with me, you're the problem. It's like, well, I can say the same thing. If you don't agree with me, you're the problem. So, there is no reality to any of this at all. Where do people come up with these things where it's only one side? It's like, no, I'm not with you, but I'm also not against you. Against you would mean fighting you for what you believe in. And I'm not fighting.
That's right.
I don't care, and I've said that before. I really don't care about this. And people get very uncomfortable about this. Like, well, you should care. It's like, well, that's your opinion also.
Yep.
And I'm going on this. I can do this all day long about the reactions that people have about this. But the only way you're going to teach somebody something, the only way you're going to get somebody, to engage in your opinion is making it a welcoming thing.
Yes.
This is what I believe. This is why I believe it. This is how it works for me. These are the good things about it. And then let that person make their own choice. Like we say in almost every episode, you will never coerce, shame, or be condescending to somebody in such a way that they'll finally go, oh, you know what? I agree with you now. We are now closer. It never works.
Never happened.
It never works.
So what we're seeing is that instant reaction has become our most valuable social currency, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit about the factors that got us here. We'll start with social media all around us as you listen to us on this podcast, on YouTube, or on your audio apps, all of which represent social media. Overall, in the social media sphere, fast reactions are the most rewarded reactions, which again replaces thought, curiosity, contemplation, and discourse. So instead, we just want a fast reaction. You either really like this or you really don't. That's the expectation.
Yeah. And we've talked about how even like the most knowledgeable people, the interesting thing about people that are very knowledgeable in a certain subject, they also are knowledgeable about the fact that they don't know it all.
So true.
So it's funny because people who are less knowledgeable are very forceful with their information, and they may be wrong or they may be incomplete in their information. So that pause before you say something, or being able to say, that's just based on what I know. And the fundamental question that you can ask yourself, have you ever been wrong? And I'm hoping everybody here says, well, yeah, I've been wrong at least once or twice. So why can't you be wrong again?
Yeah.
And did it kill you when you were wrong? And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that no, it didn't kill you. So it's okay to be wrong. And that's the thing that we've distorted so much, is that it makes you less than to be wrong. But you can only learn from being wrong.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You either accumulate more information or you gather information from the mistakes that you made, where you test and you try something and it doesn't work out. And this is the only way you can expand your horizon, so to speak, or learn new information or build confidence to engage in other endeavors.
Exactly right. So the other diabolical thing about social media is that reflection is almost proactively discouraged. Again, the feeling that you're given is that you must respond quickly to remain culturally relevant. So there's no time to think about how you feel about something. You just have to react to it. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and friends will do that too. I actually had a friend that was giving me like a story. When my sister came over and she was saying this about my kids, and it really frustrated me. What do you think? And I said, I don't know enough about you or your sister
Or your kids
to make a decision. And they're like, but I just told you everything you need to know. And I'm like, to make a decision, to give you input on this, that's not even close to what I would need to know to understand what the motivations are. I don't know if you were like condescending to your sister before it all started. I don't know if your kids were actually acting up in such a way that was problematic. I don't know any of that. So, and they were very frustrated with me for not giving my opinion in that moment. But I honestly didn't have one. I didn't have one because, I realized there are so many missing variables. And I don't know if that's a spectrum thing or anything like that. Like the pattern has not been formed enough for me to give any kind of feedback. Like I'm literally sitting still in confusion. Like I don't know what this is. I don't know what it means. So I don't have any kind of feedback.
Yes. You have one of the 2 or 3 or 4 pieces you need to make a decision.
Exactly.
And yet it's being forced on you. Make a decision now.
Exactly. And I've been in so many, especially when it comes to like human interaction, us being in mental health, we've been in so many diverse situations that other people will never experience in their whole life, with families, with people with serious mental illness, with organizations. I mean, we really interact with a lot more people than the average individual. So we've been in these scenarios where we've had like 95% of the information, but then you find that 5% actually topples the rest of it sometimes. Like, yeah, but they were something severe. They were traumatized as a child. And they're like, oh, okay, that changes everything.
The whole
right now.
Dynamic.
It's just like a simple thing. We were talking about leadership the other day. It's like the difference between someone's performance dropping off in the workplace because of, say, they're going through a divorce or their kid is sick or something happened to one of their family members, and then an empathic leader getting into that and saying, hey, I've noticed something's going on. Are you okay? Instead of bringing you into the office and saying your performance has dropped off severely and I'm disappointed in you, starting right off of that before they know that something's happening. That's the kind of thing. Like that boss has enough to go on, seeing that their performance has dropped off, but how they approach it is going to basically dictate how they fix it. Because if you go in there just cutting this person down, putting more burden on an individual who already has a lot of burdens, that's not going to improve their performance. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where you could have 95% of the information, but that one little piece changes everything.
Yes, exactly right. So the unspoken message here throughout all of this social media and other quick reaction desires that we're all seeing is that you have to say it now or you have to risk being irrelevant. That's what we're up against. But what we're challenging our listeners to do is to take that pause and realize that the idea of say it now or be irrelevant benefits someone else far, far away who's trying to make money off of social media. It does not benefit your relationships. And so it's on us to get back to the way we take care of each other by being civil, taking time, being curious, asking questions, and always leaving the door open for someone else to have a different point of view.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, the base focus of somebody acting out in anger, stating that this is the way it should be and I don't care about it, that's fear-based.
Yes, it is.
No matter how strong it may look in the moment, no matter how confident it may be, all of that performance, now just think of it from this one standpoint, all of that performance around it, why is so much volume needed in that moment? And why does that person need to exert so much to try to prove their confidence or perform that confidence? See, if you were really confident, then you would have nothing to be concerned about. Like, now this is just how it is based on the information that I have. These are the facts, and that's it. And they can start screaming, and it's like, I hear you, but I don't agree.
Yes, exactly right.
So that's a mindset that has to change, because that's where we get into these situations where anger is the attractive attention. The individual who's the loudest in the boardroom is the one that everybody's looking at, when really we need to re-exercise that. You've spoken your piece now. Everyone heard you. Everyone heard you, even down the hallway.
That's right.
Now I'm going to give you some other facts that I want you to consider. See, there's ways to break in, and I'm kidding about the sarcasm and condescension.
Yeah, of course.
All right. You said your part. Now I'm going to introduce these. But you can see that the person that's getting emotional and very forceful in those moments, it's fearful. It's fearful. And we need to start rereading that way. We need to start addressing those concerns. If it is in the workplace, we need to talk to that person and say, hey, that's not going to be tolerated anymore. And it's really interesting because the military taught me this right away. Like, we don't react. We don't raise our voices to senior people. You know, and I was actually talking to a therapist one time about those reactions. And the first thing she said, I mean, like, I was talking about how, you know, anger is one of those things. And she cut me off right away. She goes, I know it's natural. It's a response. I'm like, no, it's programmed. It is learned. And then it is reinforced, and then it becomes a natural response in those moments because that's what you practiced. And this is a therapist. And I said, you know how I know that to be a fact is because in the military, none of this happened because we knew better than to raise our voice, which means you have a certain level of control, like we've introduced in previous episodes about how is it that your anger management problem doesn't affect you when you're interacting with the boss? How is it in those moments you can keep calm? And of course, you know, I was told because I don't want to lose my job. Well, that shows you have control.
That's right.
Which also goes back to the main point which shows it's not necessary.
Yep. And that's what we have to key on, because so many factors around us want us to believe it's necessary, and it just isn't. And it's so destructive before you even realize it. It can damage relationships, and all it requires of us is some mindfulness and some intentional consideration, pausing, civility to bring it back to healthy communication.
Yeah. Intelligent kindness will win out over domination anytime. Trust me.
Yep.
And you have to practice it. You have to trust me on this, trust us on this, that just being kind, respectful, and knowledgeable. You know, one of the things that a lot of us don't engage in is professional development. You know, we have colleagues that have said, I haven't picked up a book since school. And it's like, well, that's not impressive to me because
brag. It didn't sound
especially
real
in the mental health field. It's like, you know, a lot's changed in the last 10 years. I mean, shoot, I got out of school and it was a long time ago. But anyways, a lot has changed since then. And there are a lot of people that we talk to that don't engage in any kind of professionalism. And, you know, we have a mentor out there that told us, you know, even in our crisis intervention training, you know, always hone your skills, always hone your craft. That's what he used to say. Thanks, Chris.
Yay.
But, that's the kind of thing that you don't see a lot of, you know, in our professional circles, is that people are not trying to actually become knowledgeable. They're trying to look more knowledgeable in the moment.
So we lose a lot when civility is lost in society. So let's talk a little bit about those losses. First and foremost, trust erodes. You can't feel safe and secure in environments, so you stop trusting the people around you. And the loss of civility can also mean that cooperation disappears. If you have 10 people seated at the table in a work meeting trying to solve a problem, and the environment is such that it is known that differing opinions will be rejected, then you've lost the ability to benefit from everyone's knowledge and potentially come up with a lot of good solutions instead of just what the loudest person in the room has suggested.
Yeah, and if you're a leader, please take these things to heart, because we've both been in the room when somebody put out an idea and the leader in the room was like, well, that's stupid, I don't need that, or that's not going to work, and they snap. And then they don't realize it, but they just shut down the rest of the room.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That kind of condescension, it doesn't promote somebody to be smarter in the moment.
Exactly.
So cutting them down or telling them I'm disappointed with that reaction, or I'm disappointed with the lack of participation now, because that lack of participation has probably been degraded because of the fact that cooperation disappears in these particular environments. And saying you're disappointed in your staff because they're not contributing now doesn't make them suddenly go, oh, okay, well, we can fix that by contributing more.
Right.
And possibly getting slammed again publicly in front of our peers.
Exactly. You as the leader may think that you're just rejecting one idea that you don't like, but what you've really done in a group full of people is taught them all that my opinions aren't welcome, that differing opinions aren't welcome, and I'm not going to contribute any further.
Exactly.
And then we also find that fear replaces curiosity. So people aren't even comfortable to ask a question or to introduce a new idea because they are so fearful of that rejection, the ridicule, the outright
embarrassment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So you lose curiosity, you lose the ability to encourage new knowledge and encourage learning, which is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and we say fear, that doesn't mean like being frightened and wanting to hide. I mean, it's an apprehension. And, fear could be as simple as, I'm not saying anything here because I already know what's going to happen.
Exactly right. So that's what you might hear. It's not safe to talk about this topic, so I'm just not going to bring it up. And therefore, the thing that I'm concerned about goes completely unresolved, and I feel more isolated from the people around me. You might hear, look, people just attack. If I make this suggestion, people are just going to start getting all over me about it, and I just don't feel like dealing with it. So I'm going to leave my maybe very good idea unspoken and let this persist.
Yeah, and ask yourself, why are you attacking? That's the one thing that's always bothered me. Yeah, sometimes you could be aggressive, but at the same time, you could also be manipulative on the other end and trying to tell somebody that they're attacking when they're really just giving information, when you're saying, I'm being triggered. But that, I believe, occurs in an environment where conversation and communication is not safe already. Mm-hmm. So that's when you get these people defaulting back to the protective mechanisms that don't really protect you in those moments, but it does shut other people down, which is all anybody's trying to do.
It's so true. So instead of becoming bridges to better solutions and better communication, what we find is that conversations turn into fights.
Yeah.
And people will just start avoiding those because by nature, we don't want to volunteer for something that isn't going to be productive.
Yeah, so the key here is that no growth or education takes place when there's all of this combat. Mm-hmm. And this is what really has to change, because those situations that occur, that's where growth can happen. Mm-hmm. If you're in conflict with somebody, overcoming that conflict is where you learn the most, not just about yourself, but you can learn about other people.
So true.
And not only that moment, but the continuing relationship afterwards. Because when you shut somebody down in the moment, it's gone now. Mm-hmm. It's lost, and you have to literally rebuild, which we'll talk about next.
Yeah.
All of this just divides us. It splits us up, and there's no more social growth. There's no more communication. There's no more collaboration. There's no more bonding between people.
Yeah, and we can actually use that story you told at the top of the episode about our different opinions about anger as an example, because at the time that he and I had this conversation when we were just friends, my reaction to anger would be to throw my cell phone when I was frustrated with someone I was talking to.
I didn't want to bring that up.
Well, I think it's a good example.
Yeah, it is.
And so had we not had that discourse in such a respectful way, because our friendship was important and we wanted to hear each other out, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to think about that and reflect on that a little, because I had been holding out on getting a cool new phone because my older phone was sturdier and had some duct tape on it from...
This all started because I saw the phone, and I'm sort of a nerd kind of guy. And I'm like, you really probably should upgrade that phone.
It was a flip phone.
Yeah, it was a flip phone. Mm-hmm. And she just, without thought, just said, no, I can't do that because I don't want to throw it at the wall and break it. And I was like, that's why you're not buying a new phone, and because you think you are reflexively throwing your phone at the wall and breaking it? And then later on, finding out the relationship you were in, I understood why you were throwing the phone.
So had I not had an opportunity to consider a different perspective on anger or how you could handle anger, I might have still been rocking that flip phone. I do miss my flip phone, but not the tape on it.
Yeah.
But the way that we stayed civil in our discourse with each other allowed me to get a new perspective on this and realize that there were other ways to handle that, hence growth.
And, back to hence growth, we could have ended our relationship right there.
Yeah.
I've been like, she could have been so insecure about me saying that anger is not necessary, knowing that she engages in a lot of it at the time.
Or you could have seen my phone throwing as a giant red flag.
Exactly. So that's a perfect example of how, we could have diverged at that point.
Yep.
And, and I even left the agency and then came back. But the whole time we stayed in touch when I left the agency to work somewhere else for a little while. So that might have never happened. We would have never gotten to the point that we're at right now, and you wouldn't be enjoying this podcast.
That's right.
Exactly.
So when we're not being mindful, it's really easy to retreat into spaces where you're only surrounding yourself with like-minded people who validate your opinions and your thoughts and don't challenge you. And in these situations, when they're taken to the extreme, then opposing views are dehumanized. Like you said, someone who appears to be of another group about whom we've already built opinions that may or may not be based on fact are villainized without even one word being exchanged. That's a good word, yeah. And we lose the complexity of human connection. This is the easy out instead of considering other opinions, considering other ways of being, but it completely inhibits growth. It inhibits our ability to evolve and to have deeper connections with each other.
Yeah, to actually be knowledgeable in a topic requires you to identify the fact that you don't have all of the knowledge. And that's real interesting too, because we're finding out a lot in our leadership research right now is that one of the biggest problems that leaders have is that they don't address situations that need to be addressed, like the bully at the lower level that people have been complaining about. Because what happens is like, say a week will go by and they're like, well, I haven't heard any more complaints, so it must have solved itself. So see, no information there, but we fill in this idea now that it got solved by us. It's fixed and it's now solved. So we don't ponder it anymore. So we end up literally gapping ourselves from educating ourselves in so many different situations. And it's amazing because there really is no social or educational growth. I mean, ask yourself right now, and not as a negative thing, not as a feel bad about thing, but what have you learned in the past 5 years that's different? Look at yourself from 5 years ago and ask yourself, who has come into my circle? What people have I met? And what about those different people that have come into my circle? Just say the last year. Just keep it simple. What about these people what have I learned from them? And think about, have you allowed open communication in order to learn from them? And if you have allowed open communication, I'll bet you'll come up with quite a few examples of things you didn't know because of your interaction style, because your kindness in that moment of interacting with people and they felt comfortable. How many people come into your office or come by your desk and want to talk to you about something that's bothering them, either personal or professional, and say, hey, what do you think about this? That shows that you're contributing to a cordial environment and that people still want to interact with you, that you are kind enough to maintain their dignity because it's important to you. Yeah, and what you're talking about is confirmation bias. We have a tendency to look for sources of information that support us rather than are different than what we already know. Yeah. And that's not growth. If we all like the same thing and we all get together and we keep talking about the same thing and how much we like it, that's it. There's nothing introduced new into that situation. And I mean, we have friends we know for a fact that, they haven't changed much in an entire decade, sometimes 2 decades, because they are so guarded because of bad situations that have happened, things that have been put on them. This is not their fault. This is the programming involved that nobody's ever challenged. So they have not learned anything new over time. And it's very obvious in some cases.
Yeah. And civility is the key to helping all of us, even when we're feeling insecure, feel brave enough to ask a question or bring forward a different point of view. That's what civility does for us. So what does it look like to actually restore it in the places around us?
Be that model.
That's right. It's got to start somewhere. And we are sure that if you're here listening to us or watching us, that you are motivated to be part of the change. That's what we are sure about.
Yeah, that's true.
So it starts with being able to disagree without demeaning another person. So by literally saying something like, I really disagree with that point of view, but I still respect you. I'm not going to insult you. I just don't happen to share that opinion.
Yeah, I've done that. And if they're really aggressive, I know probably shouldn't introduce this, but if I really know that they're not going to be receptive to that, I use this catch-all. Yeah, I know what you mean. You get it?
That's it right there.
That's it right there. They'll be like, this, and this, and this. And like, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not agreeing with anything, but I do know what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that. But once again, that's part of the respectfulness. And I do know what they mean, but I also know that they're not in a place yet. They haven't developed that kind of resilience that they can take on a counter kind of conversation. So I'm respecting that, and I'm preserving their dignity. I'm preserving them from being provoked in that moment by themselves in order to get ugly or condescending or forceful in their giving me their information.
Good job. So disagreeing without demeaning is one way to restore civility. Another tactic is standing firm without attacking someone with a different point of view.
Yeah, I just want to interject.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The model. Remember the model. The thing that you're doing right here is you're showing them that you can disagree without getting elevated. So this is a great part. We talked about the disagreeing without demeaning them. Now we're going to talk about standing firm without attacking.
Exactly. So this means verbalizing or just modeling behavior that shows that this is important to me, so I'm going to stay calm. It's important to me to stay calm. I'm not going to back down from my point of view, but I will not attack your character. I will not make fun of you. I will not cut you off. I will hear your point of view, but I'm standing firm on mine.
Yeah, and we've even gone so far as, I told you about that last conversation I had with somebody. I was talking to a supervisor about how things had been done that shouldn't have been done yet. The things that they were doing were out of sequence, until we have this certain foundation, we shouldn't be going on in this. And the person just kept arguing with me. And I was like, I get that. I'm not trying to demean their accomplishments, but we should have been doing this first to see how many of these other things that we need. It's a very complex thing. But anyways, I saw her getting elevated, just kept arguing, and her voice started getting louder. And I said, look, I can see that what I'm doing is making you unhappy in the moment, and I don't want to continue this conversation. And they were immediately like, no, I want to finish it. But they even became more aggressive in that moment. It's like, I never like to get people escalated. I was trying to provide you information where we have to identify the accomplishments. I wasn't demeaning anybody, and I'm sorry if it felt like that. So I did everything I could to, preserve the dignity in the moment. And I said, I can see how you'd be wanting to defend your friends in this thing, but that's not what I'm talking about. So we'll resume this conversation later. And I maintain my boundaries, even though they're like, no, I can finish it now. And it's like, if you're already at that point, you're not going to reduce it back to zero. Right. You're going to be just simmering under the surface, which just means that something else will probably provoke in that moment. And, us being verbal de-escalator trained, we know that you have to get away from that topic altogether now and let that person calm themselves down before you can continue. So I maintained my boundaries in that moment and just said, I don't want this to get out of hand. Or something in an intimate relationship that we talked about with conflict is, look, I care about this relationship, and I can see that things are happening right now where it's getting elevated. And I don't want to do that. So I used a bunch of I statements. I tried to stay away from, I can see you're getting angry right now. Even though that would have been a valid statement to say, but also you have to worry about when you identify certain things that it could make a person defensive.
Yeah.
But usually we say things like, I'm sensing that you're getting a little upset in the moment. And I don't want to do that to you. So that's a good statement to come back to. But you're preserving the relationship, you're preserving the moment, and you're trying to maintain that relationship, without the theatrics, without the problems.
Yeah. Sometimes when we're trying to keep civility in a relationship, it does mean to set a boundary in a tense moment and say, look, this relationship is really important. I see we're getting off track. I don't want either one of us to get so upset we say something we don't mean. So let's set the boundary and stop the conversation now and come back to this a little bit later.
Yeah. A simple thing is like, I care about our relationship as much as I care about this conversation.
Exactly.
It's just something simple. And this seems to be impacting it negatively in the moment.
Perfect. So we also want to model calm in what is becoming an increasingly chaotic culture. This is where we have to fight against the whirlwind of chaos around us. But hey, we are honest voice warriors, so that's what we're going to do.
Exactly.
And what we do know is that calm is contagious. And if you think about some of the most well-trained and well-practiced martial artists in the world, even though they're some of the most lethal human beings who could do a lot of damage if they felt like it, the ones who have the proper training are some of the calmest, most open-minded, most patient people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, because they don't have that insecurity. They know what they're physically capable of, and they respect that, and they don't want to get to that point. I mean, you're right. We put that in our Finding Your Honest Voice book, is that, they will even go to extreme means of avoiding the situation, even from what, like, say the alpha perspective is like cowardice. Like, I don't want to fight you, you win, whatever it takes, just whatever it takes to not have that physical confrontation. But the whole time, like you said, they're calm and they're respectful in that moment because it's not coming from insecurity. Like we said, they don't have the fear that people have that have to argue and get angry and push back and put on that display. I mean, because really, when you boil it all down to a single thing, if you have to display a certain level of emotionality, like I said, you don't feel really comfortable with the topic, and all you're trying to do is intimidate the other person into backing down.
Yes.
And that's not honesty with you either. If you want that person to lie and say, okay, I agree with you, that's what you're going for when you're using that kind of communication. So once again, that's where you think you're thriving in like-minded situations, but you're really just stagnating. Is what it amounts to.
Yeah. Absolutely right. So if we're trying to model calm and we start to sense that one of the other people in the room is getting escalated, or that maybe even we're getting escalated, we can verbalize, hey, let's slow this down a little bit. I really respect you. I respect everyone in here. And I want to make sure we're able to have a calm conversation. I want this to stay respectful. And that becomes hopefully a commitment to the other people in the room. And we start it all by modeling that ourselves. Yeah. And so civility changes the tone. Even when the culture pushes back a little bit, we are here to model. We are here to be the first person in the room to initiate the turn back to civility. We're going to identify it without pointing anybody out and just say, look, I really want this to stay respectful. I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to be able to share what I have to say in a respectful manner too.
Yeah, and I've told you in earlier episodes, being somebody that de-escalates people with serious mental illness out in public, I have gotten in a situation, like we said, calm is contagious, but so is escalation.
It is.
So as the professional, we always have to keep that mentality that we are the lead here. So when someone starts escalating, it's very easy, even if it's excitement. Like we have people that, have manic episodes and they're like, hey, you got to see this, you got to understand, and you're like, okay. But I've even in the middle of the situation, I've been like, okay, I understand. Hold on a second. And I've gone, all right, let's slow this down a little bit, and it's become, sort of a fun thing. Like we were both getting carried away with that, but it's up to us to maintain that calm model. And that's where people find it to be contagious. And not only that, I hate to say it from a cultural standpoint, the more you can model that and the more you can get people on that particular bandwagon, the more the angry outbursts will start to feel uncomfortable and start to stick out more. And that's where we want to be. We want to make that the kind of conversation that's not acceptable in a public forum, not the fact that loud is what we want and quiet is what we think is wrong. That mindset is a creation of our own social interactions, and we have to get away from that. If you look at all the negative outcomes to communication, they come from fear and insecurity. When people have put that on, like, why do you do it that way? It makes you do it another way now.
Right.
Or, what are you talking about? Makes you back down. I mean, these are things that people that are insecure put on us and change our own behavior. But what happens is we continue to practice that behavior even when it's not necessary, and it becomes part of us.
Yeah.
So now we have to change this model.
Yes. They serve a purpose for us in the short term, unfortunately. So it takes away from the realization that the purpose it's serving is actually very toxic and poisonous to relationships.
And even the purpose that it does serve in the moment is not the best.
Absolutely.
It's not the best way to go about it. I mean, It may shut somebody down if that's what you want, but it did not maintain that connection.
Right.
And it may have shut them down for the wrong reason. Like the following information now you're not getting that you might have needed in order to not make a mistake that you're getting ready to make.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some tools we can use and some reflection for this week. So for reflecting, we want you to identify one conversation that you've been part of recently where civility broke down. Just think about it. How did it start? Was it positive for a little while and then someone piped up with something negative? How did it break down? And then notice how it changed the outcome. Were you hoping to have a good conversation, but you found yourself sort of avoiding the rest of it and finding an excuse to leave the room? What was the impact of that uncivil reaction? And then for practice, We want you to commit to one act of civility in a hard conversation this week, whether it's with a loved one, a friend, at the grocery store, at work, wherever it is, or on a train, even if it's on a train. We want you to commit to one act of civility, one model of kindness, curiosity, taking a pause, inviting another point of view, one time.
Yeah, and then just practice these kind of responses. I want to be respectful even if we disagree. If someone starts getting off track, it's not going to be helpful to say, well, you're starting to get rude. That's not, when someone's getting escalated, that's not going to, you're basically calling them a name in the moment. Yeah. So saying, I want to be respectful even if we disagree. So can you do that with me? That's not putting them on the defensive as much. Or if they're saying, so what do you think? What do you think? Just say, give me a moment. I'm listening before I respond. Mm-hmm. I want to process this for a moment. And then if somebody's just like being rude, just say, look, I'd like to continue this conversation. I'm not going to use ridicule, so please maintain that respect with me. Like I've said, the best de-escalation tool that I've used with people is saying, hey, can I ask you to talk at the same level that I'm talking? I'm not asking for anything more. I'm not asking you to give more than I'm giving in the moment, but can I ask you to just like try to talk the same way I'm talking in this moment?
Yeah.
And that's it. I'm not calling them anything. I didn't even say respectful or anything like that. Just like I am talking in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So even just these small acts, just these little interjections and little choices that we make, every small act that we make starts to rebuild that foundation of safety. Unfortunately, it won't happen overnight, but the more we can model it and the more we can practice it in our own lives, the more normalized it becomes.
Yeah, exactly. We have so many models for incivility. We just tried to watch 2 different shows this weekend. We were going to binge 2 new shows, and they were just so combative that we couldn't even get through like the second episode because they're just like everything they did was either a fight or a shutdown. Either they yelled at each other or one person would just walk away in the middle of a conversation. We're like, I can't do this anymore.
There's nobody to root for here, and everything's just a bummer.
It's true.
What we really just want to drive home here as we close this out is that civility is not weakness. It's been portrayed that way, but civility is strength. It is strength that holds connection in place. And as you know, here at Honest Voice, we are all about building connection and healthy relationships.
Yeah, and think about what I've said before. If a person can lash out just like kids can, and they can calm themselves down, that's 2 things they can do. But the person who just reacts all the time, they don't have that self-control, and that would be a deficiency in a coping skill.
Yeah.
So that's how you can see it as strength. And even think about it. Somebody's screaming in your face and you just saying, I'm really sorry. This is so frustrating to you. Think about the kind of strength it takes to do that in today's society. And the response is, we do it all the time because we literally get involved in crisis responses, that it's amazing to show some empathy in that moment. In a lot of cases, us being on the scene, it's the first time anyone's ever been nice to some of the people that we interact with.
That's true.
And it's mind-blowing. Yeah. It's a feeling that they feel. And even if they were rude, even if they try to push back, they still calm down eventually and they end up apologizing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're always like, I'm so sorry the way I came off, but I thought you were going to do this. Why? Because everyone else has done that before. So that is a real strength.
Yeah, it is. So I'll tell a really quick story about an example where I saw civility actually be really successful. So in the agency or in the mental health field where we work, we find that sometimes our folks have a hard time with rules. And so if a rule is given to them, if they don't understand the reason for the rule, sometimes we'll see an outburst. Someone will get frustrated or angry. They'll reject it. They'll defy it, those kind of things. So we had an individual who was in the office and was very vocal about his disagreement with this rule, and he started to get an escalated voice and other people could hear him. So I said, okay, let's just take this conversation outside. I don't want to disrupt the work that's going on in the building. Let's just go outside and continue to talk. And he was so frustrated that all we did was sit at a picnic table and just sat there. He was too stimulated and frustrated to speak, but I didn't leave. I just sat there with him, maintained the respect, made myself available in case he did want to talk. And after about maybe 10 or 15 minutes, he felt calm enough to start talking. And years later, even once he was no longer on our services, I still hear from him from time to time, because in that moment, he felt respected and accepted, despite the fact that his behavior may have been just a little uncivil at the beginning. I didn't abandon that, and I tried to model good boundaries, and he felt accept it in that moment.
Yeah, but the interesting thing here is that you were well within your right to say, I'm not going to tolerate that kind of behavior on these premises, and you can either leave or calm yourself down. That was a respectful option to you.
True.
But rather than demean his dignity or make him feel like he was the problem, you just treated him like a human and walked out and let him calm down.
Yeah, we just changed the environment, and he just sat, and here we are all these years later, and he's still doing okay.
Didn't feel the need to dominate, control, even though you were in that position to do so.
True, very true.
Yeah. So that's where it just never works out to try to beat somebody down or assert or dominate an individual. It's much stronger to just maintain that cool. And it's something that needs to be practiced. The one thing that we do want to add here, it needs to be practiced when it's light. Like when there's a minor disagreement, you need to practice these. And if you have to, practice with friends. Say, hey, let's practice respectfully disagreeing with each other. If you find yourself, you guys have frequent arguments in your friendships, talk about that and say, hey, let's do this. Let's try to find a way that we can communicate and share these opinions. And rather than saying, why do you think that way? Say, what is it that makes you think that way? Like, tell me, explain that. And you guys both get to explore two larger worlds than keeping it in this smaller group of information that keeps locked in and nobody ever grows from it.
Yeah. Perfect. So thank you guys so much for joining us this week. We've had a great time talking about civility with you. We hope you'll find little moments to just practice these new techniques and bring civility back into your world. So from Honest Voice, have a great week.
Take care.